Chris Beard knows toughness has to return to Ole Miss, and I'll tell you why it's going to happen.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there, hosted by me, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today's show is all about Ole Miss preparing for a season-defining game against Vanderbilt. No, it's not Vandy that makes this game crucial. It's what comes after Vandy. With road games at Auburn and at Florida, plus hosting Tennessee, this is the moment for Ole Miss to find its identity again. After the Mississippi State debacle, they need to play like Ole Miss again, and I believe Chris Beard will have them completely locked in for this stretch. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special shout out to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. For a second listen, check out Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy for other perspectives on college football and the SEC. Heck, even Ole Miss. So let's get started. Hotty toddy, everyone. All right, so Ole Miss is going to Vanderbilt on Saturday, and the game against Mississippi State this past weekend, I'll just put up the box score again just so everybody can see it. Ole Miss didn't shoot particularly well. They got off to a pretty quick start. They started out 4-7 on three-point shots, but after that, they struggled mightily, like 2 for 17 clip. They turned the ball over 11 times. This was the same team that famously had one turnover against the Kentucky Wildcats. They got absolutely mauled on the boards. It's 36-48, but a lot of that has to do with Ole Miss playing plus rebounding the first 10 minutes of the game. Then it kind of got lopsided, and Mississippi State just started dominating. And it was a situation where the Bulldogs were able to pull away. Bulldogs beat Texas A&M on Tuesday night. They're on a little bit of a winning streak. But Ole Miss looked completely complacent in this game. Even the players admitted that they looked complacent. They had been told the whole preseason that the goal for this basketball team was making the NCAA tournament. Everybody was talking about making the NCAA tournament. And on top of that, everybody was pointing out about what an SEC team had to do to be a lock for the NCAA tournament. Bracketologist was putting Ole Miss in the lock category. A whole lot was going in that general direction. And the players who were 18 to 22-year-old men, they read that, probably saw what was going on. Juju Murray said that he thought the game tonight was going to be easy, I think. Sean Padula said they had no aggression, that they played complacent. Basically, what happened was they saw all of this stuff, thought they had accomplished their goals, and they took their foot off the gas. And Mississippi State, who at that point was a desperate team, punched Ole Miss in the mouth a little bit. They dominated the rebounding. They were defensive problems. They were a motivated team playing against a team that was playing complacent. That is what happened in that Mississippi State game. Now, the good news for Ole Miss is that loss to Mississippi State is just a loss of a basketball game. It isn't what that rivalry normally is, for better or for worse. Ole Miss is kind of already where they need to be. But for Ole Miss to make noise in March, they need to rekindle that spark. And the spark is interesting. This is what I call the Rebel Hoops checklist in every single game. If Ole Miss does this, they're going to be all right. They're going to more than likely win the basketball game, but they have to do these three things in the course of the game. First of all is dominate the turnover battle. This can't even be close, and the more they win this battle, the better. If Ole Miss can force 16 to 20 turnovers in a game and keep their turnovers around 5, that is going to compensate for other deficiencies that they might have. Their play in the turnover game is a massive thing for Ole Miss basketball. Number 2, do not get killed on the boards. If Ole Miss is at minus 10 rebounds or less, the turnover game can kind of tilt this back and eliminate a little bit of this rebounding battle. When Ole Miss gets beat in the rebounding battle by more than 10, they historically lose the game. It's just the way it is. Ole Miss needs to fight on the boards and do not get killed in the rebound battle. And the third of all is they need Dre Davis and Matt Murrell. They are the key scorers for Ole Miss. Whenever they score, Ole Miss seemingly wins. Whenever they do not score, Ole Miss seemingly loses. Sean Padula does all right. Juju Murray, you can count on that a little bit. Malik Deal, when he does his thing. The two main characters for this basketball team, in my opinion, are Dre Davis and Matt Murrell, the two wings. And once they get going on the outside through the drive and pop and all of that, Ole Miss is a really difficult team to stop. So whenever they go to Vandy, after they went through the Mississippi State thing where that complacency happened, I've heard whispers inside the program and what's going on that this has been a fairly busy week. Don't know that that is 100% true, but I don't doubt that it is. And we can talk to Tim Thomas all the time, and you'll hear from him on Friday night about significant emotional events that Bob Weltlich used to do whenever he was at Ole Miss, called it significant emotional events. Bob Weltlich was a disciple of Bobby Knight, just like Chris Beard. Chris Beard probably has some of the old tricks that Bobby Knight did, including a significant emotional event. I do not think this week was pleasant for the basketball team, not even a little bit. They probably went into that Mississippi State game thinking they could win this game, kind of take it easy for a couple of days, give them a chance to get their legs back, and then you kind of go on with Vanderbilt. Them losing against Mississippi State the way they did, Ole Miss probably immediately got to work on fixing it. Chris Beard is determined to fix it because there's one thing I think that drives Chris Beard crazy more than any other, and that is whenever you are just not the tougher team. When the other team just kind of imposes their will on you, that probably eats at him just a little bit and probably made it to where a birthday week was not as special as it could have been. Chris Beard is a really good basketball coach and is really good at motivating his players immediately following the game. He sent the 5 players that started the Mississippi State game in to answer questions and take accountability in front of the press. Now, the Ole Miss press, for better or worse, they're kind of trained and they're not going to ask questions out of school and all of that. So they don't really ask those questions, but it's the thought from Chris Beard that count. The accountability started immediately following the ball game. Probably the post-game speech is where the accountability started. He sent them in there. Chris Beard went into the press conference immediately following the game and said this, and this is an unbelievably big deal to hear from a Division I college basketball coach. But he said the thing that coaches don't like to say about their teams. They don't want to say at all. And he actually said this team played a little soft tonight. And that lets you know everything about how demanding this week was going to be for Ole Miss basketball. And Ole Miss has a chance against Vanderbilt at Memorial Gym. And honestly, if we're going to be real about this, Ole Miss has trouble at Memorial Gym when Marshall Henderson's not hitting a 40-foot jump shot. But Ole Miss needs to go up there and do the toughness. Ole Miss needs to go up there and play well. If Vanderbilt's hot and they're just hitting threes all day and it doesn't matter that they're covered and all that, there's not a lot you can do about that. But you can control what you do. And it's going to be interesting to see the body language on the Ole Miss players, the way that they actually play the game. I don't necessarily care about the game plan because I think the game plan is going to be solid, but I want to see how they react to that Mississippi State game because it's going to be important because after Vanderbilt, at Auburn is coming. Tennessee at home is coming. You do get to host Oklahoma, and then you have to go to Florida. You have 3 essential number 1 or number 2 seeds coming up over the next 5 games. This Vanderbilt game is massively important, as is the Oklahoma game, if Ole Miss wants to wear white, being the home team, the lower seed in the NCAA tournament. Like I said, against South Carolina, Ole Miss likely made the NCAA tournament. They did. But what Ole Miss does in the NCAA tournament, what Ole Miss does moving forward is going to be largely defined on what we see Saturday in this game. If Ole Miss comes out and plays like the veteran team that we know, if an Ole Miss team comes out and looks like Ole Miss, this is going to be fine. And I expect that Ole Miss is getting ready to go on a run in March. If it's looking a lot like the Mississippi State game, it could be one and done in March. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Either way, I have complete faith that Chris Beard's going to turn this around because he is serious. It started immediately after the Mississippi State game, accountability. They're going to be ready to go once the Vanderbilt game starts. You know, a new 2026 quarterback prospect is on the rise. He's a pretty good one, too. We take a closer look at Gavin Sidwar, his game, his strengths, and why he is kind of turning heads right now. Attention, Ole Miss fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to support the athletes they love. Now with Roy, you get to be part of the change and support Ole Miss athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player you want to decide how much to contribute to, receive exclusive content from that player back. And the best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support to help shape the team and the future of college sports with your contribution. So download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Ole Miss athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join now by downloading the Roy app and supporting your favorite athletes. So Ole Miss got an offer that went out, and we saw this from Gavin Sidwar, a quarterback, that had happened. We've been talking about quarterbacks over the last couple of weeks because they are generally the first domino in a recruiting cycle that falls. February is very early in the recruiting cycle. The very first Ole Miss Junior Day was 2 weeks ago. So we're very early into the cycle. But we're paying attention to quarterbacks. And we're going to start with Gavin Sidwar. Gavin Sidwar is a 4-star on On3 and in the industry rating. 292 overall, 19th quarterback overall, and he's the number 8 player in the state of Pennsylvania. On3 has him as a 4-star. 247 has him as a high 3. Rivals has him as a 4-star. ESPN has him as a 3-star, but he's not really rated. He hasn't received a rating yet. Now, if you look at his highlights, it is really interesting to see him actually play. He's smooth throwing the football, man. He is really smooth throwing the football. And he is somebody that you can see that after a redshirt year, because I do think he will have to take a redshirt year, being that he's 6'3", 175. He is very much built like Brody Croyle at the moment, if you can remember that. But he has a lot of arm talent, and he likes to throw the ball down the field. He's from Warrenton, Pennsylvania, in which, by the way, just for anybody that's listening and that might not care at all, I used to live in Horsham, Pennsylvania, just outside of Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, at the NESJRB Willow Grove, Pennsylvania Air Base. And Warrenton was the exit that I took to get off of the turnpike. So this is the area that I lived in. And, you know, you always hear stories about the high school football that's going on or in Pennsylvania. And I think it's CB West or something like that. Central Bucks West was the power at that point. Haven't heard much about them lately, but they were kind of the power around the turn of the millennium. Really good player. And they play some good football up there. And whenever you see exactly him throwing back shoulders, you see him making advanced level throws, that is probably what is getting Joe Judge's attention and Charlie Weiss Jr. and Lane Kiffin, those guys at the quarterback position, because it seems like they'll be easy to be developed. He has excellent touch, and he throws a very catchable pass. Now, I'm not comparing this player to Eli Manning. I'm not. So don't hear that at all, because he's a young guy that still needs to be developed, but he throws a very catchable pass. The first thing that I ever heard about Eli Manning is probably when he was a sophomore. The Clarion Ledger and Rick Cleveland did an article on Eli Manning down at Newman High School and talked about how he threw a catchable pass. He threw a very catchable pass. That is the first thing that I thought of whenever I saw Gavin Sidwar is he throws a very catchable pass, especially down the field. So we'll see exactly how it goes for him. Should be interesting. He's a really good player. I'm going to put him in the category with Luke Fahey and Reese Wise. He's kind of in that bucket as well, but he's another offer that has been gone out to quarterbacks, and we'll see. Ole Miss needs a quarterback in the 2026 class. They did not take one in the 2025 class. They do need a high school quarterback in the 2026 class, according to me. Interesting stuff. Now, before we change gears from football, I do want to mention this, and I didn't mention this yesterday, and I'm kind of mad at myself for not mentioning it yesterday, if we're going to be honest about it, because everybody in the world knows how I feel about this. Everybody's out there. I get all kinds of messages one way or another about doing this. And with the playoff expansion and everything goes through, which it looks like it will, okay? Everybody's going to talk about if, but the reality is that the Big Ten and the SEC agree on it, it's in. It doesn't need a vote. It doesn't matter what the Big 12 says. It doesn't matter what the ACC says. They ceded their autonomy to prove what's going on to the SEC and Big Ten already. It's not the SEC and Big Ten's fault. They just asked for it. The other ones gave it to them. Okay. But if this goes through to the point where conference matchups are the most important thing, and that's what's going on, the SEC is going to go to 9 conference games. The SEC Big Ten Challenge is going to happen. 10 games over the season that's going to be interested to fans, leaving 2 games that are essentially exhibitions, essentially, I don't know, preseason games as far as meaning for the playoff. You're still going to count them in your record and all of that stuff, but they just don't matter moving forward. There's not a committee. There's not somebody trying to look at resumes and comparing schedules. It's all going to be based off of your conference schedule. So me saying that, and you have a game against the Citadel and Georgia State, those games need to be against Jackson State and Southern Mississippi. They just should be. At least 2 out of every 10 years, you need to schedule a SWAC school as your 1AA opponent, and you need to have Southern Mississippi as your G5 opponent to go into a rotation with Troy, Tulane, Louisiana Monroe, those schools. Because if non-conference games don't hurt you at all, you've completely lost the argument of why you don't play them. I have zero sympathy anymore about letting Southern Mississippi die on the vine and why you're not playing them in football. Southern Mississippi might be good. They might win the game, but it will not hurt you. And it would be best for the state of Mississippi if all of the schools play, because we are at a point now financially to where Southern Miss can never catch up to where Ole Miss and State is. Southern Miss is closer to Louisiana Monroe than they will ever be to Mississippi State and Ole Miss. So that game, if this playoff expansion happens, needs to be scheduled. The SWAC school games need to be scheduled. Keith Carter has already scheduled them, one with Alcorn State in, I think, 2027. That's fantastic. Yes, absolutely. But keep the money inside the state of Mississippi, especially when they're about games that will not hurt you. If this playoff expansion goes through, yes, Ole Miss needs to play Southern Mississippi again. Just my opinion on that, but I'm sure it is lots of opinions on that. So Ole Miss baseball is off to a hot start through 4 games. Could this early success be a sign of things to come? In our final segment, we'll kind of break down what it means for the season ahead. So stay tuned. Ole Miss coming in, they're 3-1 at the moment after a walk-off win against the Arkansas State Red Wolves on Tuesday night. Good game. It was one of those situations to where Judd Utermark stole home. Ole Miss scored a run on a double play, drove in a run, so that led them up 2-0. They brought in Connor Spencer, the closer. He gave up 2 runs to Arkansas State without the other team getting a hit. It was an error, a hit batsman. It was It was bad. It was bad. It was honestly a game that last year Ole Miss lost. Ole Miss was able to stop the bleeding and get out at 2-2 and go to extra innings. And Judd Udermark hit a 2-run walk-off home run in the 11th inning, I think, maybe the 10th inning, something like that. Ole Miss won the game. That was the important part. I think Florida lost to Jacksonville. North Carolina lost to Greensboro or something, or Wilmington or something like that. Midweek games are weird. Southern Mississippi beat Mississippi State. Midweek games are weird. So just winning the games are important, especially when it's like 31 degrees. And I can't imagine how hard it was to hit against even college level pitching. If you just watch the game, there were so many weakly hit balls in that game. You could just see it's like, okay, it's honestly probably too cold to play baseball. The wind was blowing in at Swayze. We all know how that can look, but Ole Miss was able to get the win coming out of that. So that puts them at 3-1. They have a win over, at that time, ranked Arizona. They have a win over Clemson, who I think is still ranked. They run ruled them on Sunday. They got run ruled by Texas. They had a bad inning. It was another situation to where an inning just kind of got away from them. They gave up like 7 runs, I believe, in the 4th inning of that game, and that caused some problems because of it just got away from them. But 3-1. What level should Ole Miss fans be thinking about in this baseball team? And that's an interesting thought. I mean, Ole Miss plays Eastern Kentucky. They play Wright State. And another one in that vein in their weekend series before the SEC play. The toughest game that they have potentially heading into SEC play left will be next week against Southern Mississippi, who's always pretty good. And Ole Miss could get into SEC play at a healthy record. They could have 12, 13 wins going into SEC play. Once SEC play, it gets real. We know exactly what Ole Miss has at that moment with their rotation, their starters. Are there players that are working right now in midweek that have a chance to move up to Sunday? Is it a chance that Mason Nichols can fall back into a long relief mode with McCausland and all of that and have something on the back end of that rotation and in the bullpen? All of these questions are going to be answered over the next several weeks. And I like what I've seen so far in very limited viewing at this point of the new pitching coach, Joel Mangrum. I like the fact that Ole Miss doesn't seem to waste pitches when it's an 0-2 count, trying to get somebody to chase by swinging at something outside the other batter's box. I like that Ole Miss competes every single pitch. And for the most part, they have been difficult to hit. Other than one inning, it's been hard to string consistent hits against the Ole Miss pitching staff. That's interesting. That's fun. Hunter Elliott coming back as an ace, an honest-to-goodness ace. That was pretty awesome to see. And him going through and getting to SEC play, him having a Friday night to where Ole Miss has a chance just because he's on the hill, it doesn't matter who the other team has. That is a cool prospect. And then Riley Maddox and even Mason Nichols, if he stays on starters duty and on Sunday, that's pretty cool as well. Offensively, at this point, Ole Miss has played 3 games. Now, it's early in the season. 3 games to where they did not score that much. They scored 2 against Arizona, got shut out against Texas, and they scored 4 against Arkansas State in extra innings. Although this Arkansas State game, I'm willing to give them a pass because of how cold it was, honestly. So we'll see exactly what the offense looks like. Luke Hill, red hot coming out in Arlington. I think he hit over 500, hit a couple of home runs, had a triple. Dude had a weekend. Hayden Federico, as a true freshman, he's played a couple of games. Him and Braden Randall kind of alternating at second base. But he's a switch-hitting second baseman out of Monroe, Louisiana. Shout out to Monroe, honestly. And there's some potential there. There's a lot of potential. I like the way the outfield looks. I like Isaac Humphrey. I like Ryan Moorman. I like those guys in the outfield and what they can bring. But the sample size at this point, I mean, Ole Miss had 2 wins against teams that last year they probably wouldn't have had wins against this weekend. So the good vibes are kind of pronounced. I want to see exactly a continuation. Baseball's about consistency. I don't know. Was it 96, 95, something like that? It was when the California Angels changed from their very old Reggie Jackson Angels jersey into a more modern look and kind of like the last little vestiges of the California Angels. They had a first baseman. They got called up. He ended up playing 18 years in Major League Baseball, so don't take this as a negative thing. I'm just trying to illustrate a point. First 15 games of the year, he hit 10 home runs. It was JT Snow. You can look it up on Baseball Reference. His rookie year, got into an unbelievably hot start, and then everybody kind of started to figure out how to deal with him, and it became a little bit more difficult. He had to figure out what's going on, but he never was that dominant player that was the beginning. In baseball, it's about consistency. It's about doing it over a long period of time. Other things are a streak, a hitting streak, a winning streak. Everything's about a streak, but that's not what gets you titles. That's not what gets you to the next level. It's about consistency. Can Luke Hill put a season together to where he's hitting around 400, 370, something like that? Can Owen Pano, get it together? Got his first hit against Arkansas State. Also, I think he had his first error in that game. If he can play consistency and not like a true freshman, it'll be interesting. I think that Ole Miss, the question we had was behind the plate a little bit with Connor Smithwick, I think is his name. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. I apologize. With his pass ball problem that he had a year ago, this season has looked pretty good. The only pass ball that I saw was not him. So we'll see. Also, it's funny that in multiple games this year, he has led off the lineup as a catcher. I don't think many catchers as leadoff man really exist in baseball right now. So that's pretty awesome. So we're going to say this is a hot start. Luke Hill's Arlington start is making Ole Miss fans think about what could be in 2025. Yes, Luke Hill absolutely went off in Arlington, and if he can keep up any semblance of a hot start, he will get them exactly where they want to be. And it may not be hosting a regional, but it looks like after 4 games, I'm starting to think regional as far as actually going. And the last time Ole Miss went to the Omaha, they were a 3 seed in the regional. So just get into the tournament and you will be all right. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in all of college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.